Hey everybody, here's a tutorial that reviews all of the Max objects that we've covered so far. The objects that were in the previous video where we looked at probabilistic editing, also the objects in this homework part 1 and in the new homework part 2, which actually includes review objects in it itself. But I've created a separate Sandbox patch by going to File, New Patcher, and creating a blank patch and saving it. I've done that already, so I'm going to switch to that window. I've called it John's Sandbox. And this is a Sandbox patch where I'm going to play with each of these objects to go through their different functionality and look at how to use them. What I've done is I've grabbed 4 of the objects that we discussed in the first tutorial video. I've created a playlist here that has an 808 drum kit in it. Sort of classic electronic drum sounds used in a lot of dance music, just for something fun and a little bit different to use as a sound source. Now, one thing you should note, this playlist object is actually not a good way to play back sounds in a musical context. If you want a rhythmic drum beat, you wouldn't use playlist. Playlist is much more suited to the kind of work we did in the other tutorial where we're working with spoken sound files, because there is a little bit of lag delay in the playback. We can't hear it when it's audio text, but if you were trying to play back a tight drum rhythm, you would definitely hear that. And there's different objects in Max for handling that sort of tight sample level synchronization of sound. But still, for the sake of this exercise, it's perfectly fine to use these drum sounds in a playlist object. So first, let's take a look at the random object. So the random object just generates random numbers. You feed it a bang with a button, and it gives you output in a number box. And I'm going to change these, as I like to do, into a monospace font and crank up the font size so things are a bit easier to see. So when I click the button, it sends a bang to the random object, which just generates a random number. What can we do with that random number? Well, playlist, happily, when it sees a number, will play the corresponding file. So if I get another random number, it played the kick drum, sound number 3. This time random generated a 0, which plays no sound at all. So that takes us to our next object, which is plus. And plus is just plus. It just adds. So if I put in a 50 plus 1, it gives me a 51 out. It has no other function than that. It's simple integer math. If I put in a 3, it gives me a 4. So this helps us avoid the 0 here. I can take this plus, option, click and drag to make a copy of it, and I'll stick it in here. And I'll take another number box. I can shift drag it into any patch cord to insert it into a patch cord. And now I click my random. It generates a 1. We add 1 to that 1, which plays sound file 2, that 808 decay bass drum. And now we hadn't looked at this before, but I can use a button to an integer number box that has a number in it to repeat, to send again that same number. So note that this bang is not going to the random object. This bang is going directly to the number box. The number is being fired into the playlist, and we hear that sound. So that gives us a way to repeat things that have been generated randomly. So I'll get a new random number. 4 becomes 5, plays the 5th sound. And if I want to send that again, I can just keep sending that 5 by sending a bang to the integer number box. But one thing that's worth noticing, let me save this, close it, and reopen it. Number boxes don't save their contents. If you want to save contents, you actually need to use a message box. M, unlock the patch, M for a new message box. So this little structure will actually allow me to save persistently some value in this message box. Why? Well, let's do it again. We generate a random number. turn my volume back up. We add 1 to that random number, and it's a 5. We play the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th sound, the clap. But I'm also sending it into the right inlet of a message box. And as we saw in the tutorial, the right inlet of a message box turns the message box into a display object that will just show us some value. But this is a persistent object, meaning when I close the patch, watch what happens to my number boxes versus what happens to my message box. Save, close, open recent. Right, the number boxes zero out, but that message box is still holding that 5. So if I click the button to send a bang to the left inlet of the message box, it will send that 5, and we'll hear sound 5 again. And it keeps turning down the volume on me. I'll just turn the volume up, go over to my snapshots window here, and just record a snapshot and make it persistent. Saved in the patch. That way my volume won't reset each time I open and close the patch. And also, I don't need this button. I can just click directly on the message box, because message boxes in a locked patcher are buttons that send their own contents. So random value generated. It generated a 0 this time, but instead of hearing nothing, we've added 1 to that 0. So we play sound number 1. That 1 is now persistently saved in this message box. I can keep sending it. All right, so that's just a little exploration of random. Now, what if we take the random out and switch it with an earn? So earn is another random number generator, very similar in its intent, except it generates random numbers without repetition, meaning it will generate the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a random order, and then when it's done, it will stop. And since we have the +1 here, it's actually going to effectively generate the random numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then it produces no more output. I keep clicking it, it's done. Why? Because it needs the clear message. The clear message will clear its history of having generated those 5 numbers, and it'll start over and do it again, start fresh. Clear? 5, and then no more until I clear. Okay, and we see how that functions. And if you want it to be persistent, the right outlet of earn reports with a bang when it has exhausted all of its numbers. So I clear it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The next time I hit it, it's going to report, I'm done, I don't have anything left. Right? And any further time, it's just saying, no, I'm finished, I'm out. Well, we can, of course, connect that back to the clear. And now, the fact that it's finished is what sends the clear message into it. One other thing to look at is +1 is, of course, not the only number we can do here. For instance, what if we wanted to randomly play sounds 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10? Well, that's simply +6. Then if earn produces a 0, sound 6 will play, because 0 + 6 is 6. If earn generates a 1, sound 7 will play, because 1 + 6 is 7. So now I'll clear this out, and I'll get a sequence of 5 sounds between 6 and 10. But they're, of course, in a random order, because that's what earn does. Earn is a random number generator. So what I'm doing here, how I'm playing with this, is sandboxing, right? I've made a new patch, and I'm working with the object to really grasp what it does, really grasp how it works. So moving on from earn and random, we have route, which was also presented in the tutorial. And route we saw in this context. We saw it in the context where the 4th outlet, playback notifications, sends out some message, and we're looking for the word done. So again, we can build a little sandbox here to make sure that we fully understand that. Again, using the right inlet of MessageBox so that MessageBox becomes a display object. So we'll get a new sound out of the urn. I'll clear it first just to make sure. And it plays sound number 8 because it generated a 2. 2 plus 6 is 8, so it plays the 8th sound. And we see that it spits out this message, done 8, and then the location of the sound. So after a route done, we see that the word done has been chopped off. So, okay, that's one use of route. But of course, we can generalize this. So let's take it out of this context and try it with something else. So we'll make a message box and say done 10. And we'll send that into the route and see what comes out. As expected. It sees the word done, chops it off, and sends us the rest of the message. So what if we send it like something random, like Frank 10? Well, it's a 10, so it could be coming through. We don't know. Let's send it Frank 12. Nothing comes out of this left outlet. Well, let's check out the right outlet, see if something comes out of there. It rejects the whole message, right? Frank 12 just passes through the route, whereas done 10 reports the 10. And of course, we have the $ argument that we looked at while programming the prob, so we can try some stuff here. We can do done $1. So any number after the word done is going to come out the left of a route done. Let's do the same thing with Frank here. Frank $1. Any number that's not done is going to come out of the right outlet with the word still attached. And, we may or may not find that useful yet, but it's something that we have as a tool to use. For instance, here's one way. It's a complicated way, but here's one way to determine when a particular sound has played. I could say route done, route 8. And now it will look for a message that begins with the word done. That's cool. And it will take off the word done and send the message on. Then the second route will be looking for a message that begins with the word 8, or begins with the number 8, I should say. And if it sees it, it will chop that 8 off and pass the rest along. So this is a detector to detect that sound 8 specifically has finished playing. Let's see if we can get it to fire. I'm going to clear my urn. That was sound 9. That was sound 6. That was sound 10. That was sound 7. That was sound 8. And there it is. So, obviously, this message here, that the file path doesn't do us a lot of good, but if we use a button to just convert that message into a bang, we can use this bang to do some other function. For instance, play the next sound. So, clear this. No sound is going to autoplay the next sound except sound 8. 7 doesn't. 10 doesn't. 9 doesn't. But 8 does, right? So that's another use of route. There's lots of ways to use route down the road, but again, you just want to sandbox each object like this, play with it so that you come to some understanding of what it does and what it doesn't do, which is also important. Like, none of these objects we've looked at so far play sounds except for playlist. That's an important thing to know. These are not sound objects. They're numeric objects. Random generates a random number. Urn generates a random number. Plus adds one number to another as the most basic form of simple addition. And route looks at lists and searches for terms within lists. The only actual sound player we have is the playlist. So that's it for this first group. So I'm going to just take this stuff that's in my sandbox and move it out of the way for a moment. And now what you're going to want to do in your sandbox that's different from mine, because I already know the purpose of all of these and function of all of these objects, is you're going to want to use the C key to comment on what each of these things does. And that way you can go back and look at these things, and this becomes like, a notes page for you.